fruits, nuts, and seeds.
Jabari, thank you for teaching us to be healthy.
The energy that I feel with these meals.
Jabari, that was really good.
Like a kid with new toys. Health is my greatest joy. Come and see, come and be with our host Chapati.
Hello and welcome to Food with Life. I'm your host Chapati, and we're here at the Conscious Life Expo in Los Angeles, California. And we have a very revered guest today. Very fortunate to have him. He's an author and writer and a wonderful person, Mr. Dan Millman.
Hello, Chapati.
Very kind to have you. Very
Good
nice.
to be here.
There's an idea I was looking in a book, and it talked about, it was relating to yourself. One is harnessing powers of universal law, spiritual laws, all types of laws, perhaps. So let's talk about this for a short time.
Sure. In this way I've been given to teach, and it developed and evolved over time, one important facet when we acknowledge life as a perfect school, every school has rules. And the rules of our domain and the universe, as far as we know, we could call spiritual or universal laws. And they're as real as the law of gravity. That's one of the spiritual laws working in the physical domain. We can count on it every time. It works everywhere. Some people say, but gravity doesn't work in space. Of course it does. It's just a weaker force in space than it is closer to massive bodies. But it works everywhere as far as we know, one of the fundamental forces. And so spiritual law can also guide our lives in very practical ways. So some years ago, I wrote a parable about an ageless woman sage I meet in the mountains who teaches me 12 essential spiritual laws that can guide our lives. By harnessing ourselves to those laws, by acknowledging them, it can give a fundamental kind of wisdom in order to guide our actions and our perspectives. In other words, for example, we stop swimming against the current. We realize the currents of life, how reality works, and we begin flowing with that. So that's what I'm going to be talking about at my workshop on harnessing the powers of spiritual law.
Interesting, you talk about the law of gravity. It came to mind. How does law of gravity work with what I could say is law of attraction? You know how ideas, concepts, people, very much attracted to one another. You know, so, and in a way, this is a gravity, is it not?
Yes, in fact, I believe his name is Brian Swim. He's a cosmologist, and he came up with one of the best definitions of love that I've ever heard. Love is gravity. Gravity is love. It's the mutual attraction from every body in the universe to every other body. The force of love is that's what gravity is, essentially, is love.
Yes.
I thought that was quite an interesting approach
Yes,
to
I just had
the
this
definition
idea.
of love and gravity.
Yeah.
Now, when you say the law of attraction, of course, you can also refer to that popular idea of like attracts like and all the magical thinking and of that book, The Secret. And that is not a law, that's a theory. Because a law is something that you can count on every time. It's consistent, it works everywhere. And so in my workshop, I'm going to define the difference between laws and theories and principles and proverbs and accepted wisdom. A law is something special.
Yes. So I am familiar with the concept of natural law, which is probably the same thing.
Sure.
To me, a law is perhaps more than set in stone, as they say. It is. You understand?
Yeah.
It's like being.
It's axiomatic.
Yes.
Exactly. But, you know, there's a saying that we're all entitled to our opinion, but we're not entitled to our own facts. Facts, laws, they either work or they don't, and they're self-evident rather than opinions or beliefs. Very big difference. And it's important for us to distinguish. Beliefs are fine, opinions are fine, but we don't want to confuse them with laws. And so, again, with more time in a workshop situation, I go into the difference between the two. In fact, that's one of the most fundamental goals, is to have people understand what makes a spiritual law. And then I give examples when we experience the powers of the law of balance, process, presence, and so on.
Yes, it's the whole idea of spiritual laws and how we can apply them to ourselves, and
Yes.
not outside. Because everything in the universe is based on you or me. Your everything outside, it's your experience, your perception, everything is on you. And I know they talk all about, in the world, about the universe and the pollution and cleaning up this and doing that and doing this and doing that. It doesn't matter. In a way, it doesn't matter. In a way, it does matter. What matters is what's in here. Because without this and your perception, your heart, and your observance of all that, it has no meaning.
Well, it is important to remain practical in terms of how will I apply this in my everyday life.
Right.
And my work is centered around that. It's nice to have our head in the clouds, but we need our feet on the ground.
Okay, we're going to talk about that in the next segment,
Great.
all right? I am your host, Chaparti. This is Food with Life with our wonderful guest, Mr. Dan Millman. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to Food with Life. I am your host, Chaparti, and we're here at the Conscious Life Expo with our wonderful guest, Mr. Dan Millman. You were talking a bit about gravity and laws, theories, and I was commenting about, whether what is set in stone as they speak, and how important it is that we, as individuals, see everything, and it's not only everything outside, but predominance is what we're experiencing.
Well, I would phrase that many people enjoy abstract concepts. Personally, I gravitate toward practical, everyday, how can I apply this? Because we live our lives moment to moment in daily life, and we have plenty to think about already. So I guess being a former athlete years ago, it keeps me fairly practical. I aim toward outcomes rather than just ideas. And ideas are fine to contemplate and think about, but I like to bring things down to the level of everyday life. How does it work? And it's not just applying spiritual laws to our lives, but it's applying our lives to spiritual law, because it was here before us. And so the more we're attuned to the way reality works, that's what spiritual law is about. In fact, scientists and mystics have the same goal, which is to understand the laws of the universe. They just use different methods of investigation. Scientists study and measure predominantly from the left brain. Every scientific discovery came from the right side of the brain, our holistic intuitive self.
Yes.
That's why Einstein said, as most of us have heard, that imagination is more important than knowledge.
Yes.
Because every scientific discovery comes from the imagination. Then we use the left brain, the analytical side, in order to test and experiment, use the scientific method to test whether it is real and valid and reliable. So that's why it's very important to appreciate both sides of our brain, the imaginative side and also the rational side.
One is maybe the creator, and the other one puts it into action.
Yeah.
It manifests it.
Right.
Yes, it's very beautiful. With my thoughts, though, when I was getting back earlier, is that it's all about how everything outside and the pollution and concern and saving the planet and all this. It's my strong belief that, of course, we have to perceive it, and it is our individual self. Without our individual self, there wouldn't be anything to perceive. So to me, it's essential that we take care of our individual self, our body, our physiology, through whatever ways we do it, to keep our health at maximum, you know.
Well, that it would be our primary responsibility. Whatever one's beliefs about soul and cosmos and the world and saving the world and the universe and different dimensions, we still have the one thing we're guaranteed to keep our entire life. The only thing,
Yes.
not our beliefs, not our family, not our philosophies,
Right.
but our body. That's the
Right.
only thing we're going to keep our whole life. So,
Right.
and most people take better care of their car, their dog and cat.
It's
They feed
true.
their dog and cat better,
It's
more
true.
consistently. So that's why it does come back to the body ultimately in terms of how we take care of it, and that's now we have different genetic predispositions, so it's no one's fault. I mean, if they become ill, sometimes it's a genetic predisposition, but we have triggers. And certain genes get triggered by certain behaviors.
Yes.
So someone whose parents died young of heart disease may have a more tendency toward heart disease, but they can adapt their lifestyle to keep that getting triggered. And they can live a longer, healthier life by their choices. So we do have some wiggle room. It's not all about DNA.
Right, right. Yeah, the choices is what
Right.
is the concern. So, you know, it is my strong belief that we want to. Food is a major way we can influence the body. You know, of course, there's other things, but food is what you put in, and if you don't put in the good chemicals, the good nutrition, the good whatever you want to say, the body will not react in a good way. The body will get sick, and eventually you'll die.
Well, I entirely agree, and I think most people do, that what we eat is important.
Yes.
And yet, all around us, the fast foods, the convenience foods,
Right.
people who are more poor, they have less money, they buy cheaper calories.
Right.
And what's available in the neighborhood market rather than going 20 miles to a
Right.
organic market. So they're practical considerations. Pavo Airola was a wonderful health expert. He spent his life going to different cultures, long-lived cultures. He wrote a book years ago, a classic called Are You Confused? With all the theories about food. And this was written 30, 40 years ago. Excellent book. And he was a doctor, PhD.
Yes,
And Airola once said, it's better to eat a standard American diet, which, as you know, is abbreviated SAD, S-A-D, and exercise regularly, than to eat a pure, natural, organic, vegetarian food and never exercise. So even though food was his specialty, he believed strongly in exercise. And I find that the holy trinity of health, with all the gourmet approaches and the green powders and all the special foods, really it comes down to are we doing regular exercise, are we eating a balanced diet for us, and are we getting enough rest? Those three things would seem very
We're going to talk about rest. Very important thing.
Okay.
Right?
sure.
I'm your Chapati with our wonderful guest, Dan Millman. Dan Millman. He's worth $1 million. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Hello and welcome back to Food with Life. I'm your Chapati and we're with our wonderful guest, Dan Millman. You know, we were talking a bit about you're talking about this wonderful concepts of food and diet, you know, and that's my essence of what I feel is important. Of course, activity and diet, and the balance of the two. Comment on that and its relationship to natural law.
Well, of course, the body has its own laws.
Yes.
We humans share in common a digestive system with a certain length intestines and certain teeth, types of teeth, and so on. So and metabolisms and hearts and lungs. So we share much in common, and yet there are also vast individual differences in cultures. In some people have food allergies, some don't. Some people are sensitive to gluten or lactose, and other people aren't. So it's very important, I think, for each individual to take responsibility, to experiment and find out what works best for them. It's taken me many years to realize, after being a young, zealous teacher, to realize there's no best teacher, no best book, no best religion, no best path, no best diet, only the best for each of us at a given time in our life. So it's a conscious awareness process to find out, at this point in my life, what works best for me. I was an omnivore in college, ate everything, including donuts, in abundance. I burned off a lot of calories as a young athlete. And I didn't think that much about food very much. I just ate what I was
Open
taught.
the mouth and put it in.
Pretty much. And I got away with a lot because I was young and I was training very hard in sports. But then after I had a motorcycle crash and I was in the hospital, a friend of mine who was a vegetarian, he was a vegan actually, a physician friend, an emergency room doctor who was a longtime vegan, brought me a book on vegetarian diet. I'd never thought about it. It surprises me now. I was an aware young man, but I'd never thought about it. And I read this book while in the hospital. And I said, this makes sense. I saw the famous people from history were vegetarians, and it seemed healthier, overall, eating a lighter diet and so on, and there were ethical considerations. And only when my friend John Robbins started teaching about the environmental impact years ago did I take that into account. And when something makes sense to me, I do it.
Yes.
And so I stopped eating meat. So I was a vegetarian. I tried being a vegan for a couple of years, and for me it just wasn't a fit.
It didn't work for you.
It seemed a little extreme for me. It's great for some people. So I went back to a vegetarian diet with some eggs and later on a little bit of cheese,
Protein,
yogurt.
perhaps,
Yeah, well,
something.
you and I both know that it's almost impossible not to get enough protein. If you eat sufficient calories and you eat a varied diet of fruits, vegetables, grains, there are amino acid chains that make up a complete protein. So
it can combine all the amino acids in different many.
exactly. So I mean, the only problems regarding protein in people's diets are too much protein. Most people eat too much.
Yes.
Now there are people with kwashkio, or who are, but they're not just protein starved. They're food starved.
Yeah,
They're
yes.
starving people. But most people should not worry about how much protein they're getting.
Right.
And some people, if they're training really hard, building muscle, maybe they need a little more protein. But the point is, I've been a vegetarian that way for many years, 30, 40 years. And then more recently, though, in the last maybe 5 years, occasionally I'll eat a little bit of fish.
Right.
Now, to some vegans, they say, oh, that's horrifying, But you find out what works for you.
What's good.
It's
Yes.
dangerous imposing a philosophy on the body.
Right.
A philosophy is for thinking about.
Right.
The body has its
It
instincts.
may not want it.
We need to find out what
Right.
works best for us,
Right.
trusting our instincts. Occasional fasting helps sharpen our instincts. So that's what I've done in my own life.
Speaking about your athletics, what event were you good in? What type of?
Oh, well, when I was a young boy, I loved to climb trees and swing on things and
But
so
you were
on.
an Olympian.
I was agile, so
No, what type of thing were you?
I ended up discovering the trampoline, and I ended up winning a world championship on the trampoline in London. But that took me into gymnastics, all the events. People have seen the Olympics, the Olympic Games, and I did all the events. I was a national champion on several events and
Yes.
competed internationally in the gymnastics training.
Did you do gymnastics when you were a vegetarian?
Yes, I did. In fact, I went back to college my senior year to compete my last year in gymnastics, recovering from my broken leg, which I finally did. And in my book, Way of the Peaceful Warrior, I do, and the movie, the Peaceful Warrior movie with Nick Nolte, it does show the motorcycle crash and my recovery. And we were able to win the national championships. I helped my team do that after I recovered. And my senior year, I told my coach, I said, I'm a vegetarian now, I don't eat any more meat. He said, oh, Dan, you've got to eat meat for protein and iron and so on. And I said, no, I really don't think I need to, Coach. I was one of the strongest gymnasts in the United States on a vegetarian diet.
Really? Okay, we're going to come back. I want you to tell me more about it. I am your host, Chapati. We're Food with Life. We'll be back in just a minute. Stay with us, please. Hello, and welcome back to Food with Life. I am your host, Chapati. We're with our wonderful guest, Mr. Dan Millman, very skilled writer and creator of what we call as a peaceful warrior. You were beginning to touch a bit about how the vegetarian diet and your athletics. Let's touch on that shortly, and then we talk about some ideas that you bring out in your film.
Happy to do that. And I probably should add that I don't presume to be an expert on diet, exercise, medicine, health, or any other field. But an understanding of spiritual law gives a certain wisdom and perspective that allows one to make some insight, give insight into different topics. So when I speak of food, my own diet, it's from my own experience and observations. It's not necessarily more valuable than anyone else's observations or experiences. But I do come from a place, I hope an objective place, of common sense, if nothing else. If spiritual law isn't combined with common sense, it's not much good.
And that's from your experience.
Yes, I'm speaking from my experience, not a theory I just read in a book somewhere. So, and this, you mentioned the word peaceful warrior. Of course, what that means, it's about all of us, because we're all striving to live with a peaceful heart, but there are times in our lives we need a warrior's spirit, because it takes courage to live and to love in this world.
Yes, I know sometimes I've seen in people, and even at a time in myself, suddenly I'll be doing something and boom, a bit of spurt of anger will come up, you know?
Sure.
Or some discontent, you know, about something. Any ideas or concepts you have for perhaps dealing with emotional upsets?
Yes, absolutely.
Tell me.
No problem.
Please.
Okay. Again, it's very practical approach. It's based on what we can and cannot control. If we could will ourselves to feel any way we wanted, then all we would have to do is will ourselves to be happy the rest of our life. But emotions are very natural. They're as natural as dreams, natural as breathing. Emotions pass like the weather. They're the weather patterns of the body. I know you appreciate this. So sometimes I feel angry. Sometimes I feel frustrated. Sometimes I feel depressed. Sometimes I feel happy. Sometimes I feel anxious. All these feelings, what we call positive and negative, pass like storms, like the weather.
Yes.
Some days dark clouds, some days sunshine. So I've come to accept my emotions and my thoughts as natural to me in that moment, rather than trying to fix them or run from them or change them or worry about them. I feel what I feel, I think what I think. I focus on positive, constructive behavior. One of the most controversial things I've ever taught is that I don't ask my students, my audiences, I don't ask them to feel grateful or feel happy or peaceful or loving. I ask them to behave that way. And many people go, wait a minute, but is that authentic? Asking people to behave a way if they're not feeling that way? If we define authenticity as acting in line with our feelings, then it's a pretty chaotic life, because our feelings are changing all the time.
Right.
So at the same time, we can accept our feelings and embrace them, whatever we're feeling, because they will pass.
Yes.
At the same time, we can focus on, but what is a constructive and kind behavior in this moment, despite what I'm feeling, whether I'm confident or motivated or happy or sad, what it would be a constructive behavior right now. And that's how I live my life, and that's what I teach.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yes, I know. I see in people, and I think this is a big dilemma in the world, is people see other people's perspective as their own, you know? And they say, why not? Why don't you do this and do this and do this? You know, they have no concept or idea of their side of the story, you know? And so they put their idea onto this other person, this other country, you know? The upset in the world is all the time. A nation is putting their ideas and concepts onto another. And they have no idea what they actually have been through from an experiential side, you know? And this is a dilemma, you know? So I'm wondering if you have some ideas or concepts you think that might actually help politicians, people who make the situations of the world.
I believe that we're all doing the best we can with our own wounds, our own blind spots, our own baggage and history. Each human being has a different karma, a different destiny. We're all doing the best we can with the tools we have at hand. So I think it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Politicians, people in every field. And we're learning little by little, little light bulbs going on. I think it's not about sudden enlightenment. I think it's more about like a dimmer switch being turned up gradually. Over time, humanity is evolving and growing. So I'm maybe a short-term pessimist, but a long-term optimist.
It's beautiful. I want to thank you so much for your time. Very, very honored to have you. And maybe at one point we'll be going to a kitchen and make some food with you.
That would be fun.
All right. Thank you again. Our pleasure.
My pleasure.
I am your host, Chapati, with our wonderful guest, Mr. Dan Millman. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you very soon. Have a good day. Be happy and enjoy. Bye-bye. Hello and welcome to Food with Life. We're with our wonderful guest, Mr. Dan Millman, at the Conscious Life Expo in Los Angeles. And I have to ask you a question. There's in this Peaceful Warrior, which was a movie, you wrote the book. The movie was from the book, yes. And there are very different concepts and ideas, which are all universal. I know I have a list here, and I was going to ask you a few of them. You know, when it says, which to me is the most important, is what I call vitamin L, love. Love is my torch. You want to say a short bit about it?
Well, I think what you're reading from is something that was in the guide, the catalog, the Expo guide. And I was delighted to see that the ethos, the tenets of the Peaceful Warrior didn't happen to be written by me. Someone probably took some of the material from my website, which is, by the way, peacefulwarrior.com. If anyone wants more information, they can go to the website.
Yes.
There's some interesting features there. There's a life purpose calculator where people can put in their date of birth. It's free, and just put in their month, date, and year of birth, and they can get a taste of their hidden calling, their life path, based on one of the books I wrote, one of the 16 books in 29 languages now, called The Life You Were Born to Live. It deals with life purpose. So there are many things at the website, but I have sort of a few statements about the Peaceful Warrior's way. It begins on the ground, it begins where you are, it works at every level. But what was written and what you asked me about was some poetic person, I think, took off from there. Now, I'm happy to speak about the idea of love is my torch, though, because it's been said, whatever the question, love is the answer. Most of us agree with more love in the world. Who was it? Was it Jimi Hendrix that said, when the power of love finally overcomes the love of power, humanity will finally change. So, of course, love, we all agree, is very important. But an approach to love that I take in my own teaching that may be different from some other metaphorical, poetic approaches to love is that I admit I don't feel loving all the time. I don't know anybody who does. But rather than focus on whether I feel loving or not, I focus on whether I behave that way. Can you behave with loving kindness? This makes a big difference.
Right.
And it takes a great deal of wisdom to know how to be kind in a given situation. Otherwise, we try helping people across the street that don't even want to cross the street.
Right.
So to know how to be kind takes time and perspective and wisdom.
Right.
But to me, love is an action, not just a feeling.
Not an idea.
Yeah, or an idea.
Right. I want you to look at this. And you
Sure.
mentioned something about some of these ideas.
Well,
So I've not put the words in your mouth.
well, the Earth is my school. Let's just touch upon that.
All right, good.
I suggest that planet Earth is a perfect school and daily life is our classroom. We're here to learn the lessons of daily life. And have you noticed that lessons repeat themselves until we learn them?
Right.
Most of us have noticed that.
Right.
And if we don't learn easy ones, they get harder to get our attention.
Right.
So whether one reads my books or anyone else's books, whether someone attends seminars, daily life will continue to teach us everything we need. Our relationships, our finances, our health issues, our diets. They're constantly teaching us, and we evolve and grow through our life experience. Not through right and wrong, not through concepts of right and wrong, but through action and consequences.
Right. Yeah, I've sensed that many people, their intellect gets in the way and that pushes their heart aside. You know, I have an idea to do this, to do that, and it may relate with 4 or 5 other people. They don't even come into the picture. You know, our ego comes first. You know, what we have to do, we get done, and then we don't even think about the other person many times, and then we realize, whoa, this person doesn't feel that way, or it had caused a bad reaction. You know, it's so important that we act from the heart. You know.
Well, I think a good way to close this is a quote by Hillel, who said, "If I am not for me, who will be? But if I am only for me, who am I?
Right.
And if not now, when?"
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
A lot of wisdom in
So
a few
to
words.
say goodbye to our audience, what kind of words of wisdom would you suggest people put into their life?
Well, you know, there's such a tendency.
If they don't have it.
Yeah, well, we all have it. We
Right.
all have it.
If they're not using it.
Of course. But I just offer reminders of what people already know at deeper levels, but we tend to forget.
Right.
And what I like to remind people is we tend to second guess ourselves so much. I should have done this, I should have done that. Oh, if only I had said this. Oh, I've fallen off the path, and so on. I think it's very important for people to trust their process of their life unfolding, to know that wherever they step, the path is going to appear beneath their feet.
Thank you so much. Great to have you.
Pleasure.
Our honor you took the time to be here.
Pleasure.
And our blessings and happiness for you, our audience. We're so grateful that you're watching Food with Life. We hope to see you again. Enjoy, be happy, eat well, and have a good time. Bye-bye.
Veggies, fruits, nuts, and seeds.
Jabari, thank you for teaching